Hi, guys. I have another beautiful guest today. This is Aaron. And I shared with Aaron that I've been following him for more than a year on my Instagram channel. And I actually found out about him through another social media where he shared something from his life. I like that a lot. And then I followed him. And recently, I've decided to bring more men guests because I want you boys here, so gentlemen, to know more about men's challenges, men's path in intimacy, sexuality, growth, spirituality. Why not? Because you're going to see that Aaron is a very special guest. So, yeah, I'm going to let Aaron introduce himself and his work, and then I'll dive in with the questions. Hi, Aaron. Welcome.
Hi, great to be here. Love what you're creating and happy to be in service and support for you.
Awesome. Yeah, you are
Yeah.
in service for a lot of people, actually, right?
I do my best. Yeah, I've been in this field of transformational coaching and supporting humans for the last 15 years, the last probably 7 to 8 years more in the tantric field, really integrating sexuality as well. And yeah, I think from a very young age, I've had a love for understanding why we do the things we do and how can we begin to make more different conscious choices.
Mhm.
When I was 14, I counseled my father out of his gambling addiction, and it changed the total trajectory of my life and my experiences. And I began to ask bigger questions and want to know bigger answers and to really find out, the bigger meanings behind this human experience. And the more I've come to understand that, the more that I've deepened my journey into the field of Tantra, where all parts of the human experience are welcome. The good, the bad, the crazy, the sexual, the emotional, all parts are perfectly divine and welcome, and we get to experience all of that in our journey of coming home back into our heart.
Mhm. Wow, that is powerful. So
Mhm.
you have, at least since you were 14, your skills started showing up spontaneously, from what I see.
Yeah, whether or not I I liked it or not, really. Mm. I mean, I was often the one as a young adult that family and friends would, talk to about relationship things or, their personal issues, and I just thought that's what everyone did. And then as I got older, I started to realize, wow, okay, there's a natural gift here. And my life didn't really lead that way initially. I'm a ship's captain by trade, so I spent many years navigating ships on the open ocean, and when I was 18 is really where I found my soul for the first time in a pretty strong near-death experience. And from that moment on, I just started to have a deeper dialogue with my authentic self, which just guided me into the field of spiritual psychology in my early 20s. I did a master's degree. I've been teaching and speaking from a lot of stages around the world and, do a lot of online content these days. But yeah, there's a curiosity that's always been inside of me of supporting both myself and others into what does it feel like to feel safe, to feel trust, to feel grace and ease in the body. And when I say grace and ease, that doesn't mean like always being positive. It's always happiness. It's like, no, can I experience and love and have appreciation both for the challenges of life? And often people come to me when their lives are filled with a lot of challenges. Men will come when they're having trouble in the bedroom, or their wife says, "Hey, go talk to a specialist, or else we're going to get divorced," or whatever the situation is. So the question I always ask is, okay, how can grace and ease flow into this man's life, my own life, in a way where the essence of the heart gets to be revealed more and more? And that's a question I think that's different for everyone. But grace and ease, I find, really happens more thoroughly when all parts of the body are integrated. The mind, the heart, the belly, our rage, our sadness, our anger, our frustration, and our sexuality, our animal instincts, our part of us that wants to you know, annihilate another and fuck another and all of the impulses that are at our lower chakras.
Mhm. So when you ask that question, how can we allow more ease and grace into our lives when you're working with a man? What is, how does a man take this question, first of all, from you?
Well, I would say initially with a lot of trepidation and fear and worry, and often with trying to logically understand how can I create more ease and grace. You know, the male psyche, we're built from hunters and gatherers that like to create logic, reason, and understanding into our day-to-day world. And those are beautiful ways of being and incredible in the structure and form and rigidity and everything that's very come to be normal in our society and structure. And yet, what I've experienced is an actual embodied grace and ease lands in my body when I let go of my logical mind trying to figure out how to get it. So, what does that mean? I have to dive into the feminine mystery in a male body. And, you know, if people are listening to this, maybe there's a male listening and they're like, what do you mean, feminine mystery? I'm an alpha man. I get shit done. I do things in the world. I'm not a feminine. And, you know, I just want to caveat that. Like, I come from a maritime military world. If you would have had this conversation with me, you know, 20 years ago, I'd be like, absolutely not. Who is this joker? Like, what are you talking about? And yet, what I've continually found is that when I meet my edge of growth, when I meet my edge of transformation, what it's asking me to do is to dive into a deeper mystery that's alive inside my body. And the deeper mystery that's alive inside my body, what I've come to lean into more is more of a feminine mystery. And a quick kind of science comprehension is that I'm in a male body, you're in a female body. We live in a world of duality, and duality means that everything is made up of an equanimous state. So we have polarity of positive charges and negative charges. That's what our cells in these bodies are made up of. And yet our conditioning has dictated that I know and vibrate through the world in association to what it means to be a male body. You vibrate and move through the world and what it means to be a female body. And yet inside that your own female body, there's a masculine essence. Inside my own male body, there's a feminine essence. And what happens in most of the conflict that arises inside the boardroom, inside the bedroom, inside relationship is, you could say, the contrasexual self, meaning if you and I were to be in a relationship, probably our deepest friction would be my feminine relating with your masculine, because those are the most undeveloped characteristics inside both of us. So at the point of challenge and discontinuity, our most unconscious parts are going to get shuffled to the surface. So when I'm having that conversation, back to your initial question, when am finding more grace and ease, what he has to begin to lean into is 90% of the time, not for all men, just some men have more of a feminine, you know, association. But for the most part, a lot of men, and often the men coming to me just are more the alpha men, they have to lean into a place of greater receptivity and greater curiosity and greater capacity to let go of the logical mind trying to find its way through the world. Because a certain point comes when the mind needs to let go, and the knowledge, the awareness, the frustration, the trauma of the body can begin to be revealed. And underneath that frustration, trauma, challenge is a place of deep rest and relaxation where there's I'm home. There's nothing I need to do. My anxiety isn't running my world. I'm not afraid of losing my job, my woman, my life, my career. I can be home in my own heart in a way that I never have before.
That is a very intense process. And
Mm.
I'm very curious, how long does it take for the men or the couples that come to see you with various challenges? how long does it take for the men to actually reach that stage, reach that relaxation and that embodiment?
Yeah, a good question. I mean, two sides to that. One, I don't know that there's ever a place where we get somewhere, and that might sound a little esoteric, but yes, there are layers that we can let go of, so I won't go down the esoteric bandwagon. But when I'm typically working with someone, I'm not a therapist that likes to work with someone for the next 5 years. I generally like to, if I can, do a one-off session that has a life-changing impact on someone's life, and then they can move forward.
Mhm.
Generally, I don't think that always works, so I like to work with someone for either, generally, most of the clients I work with are around a 10-session package.
Uh-huh.
So, and then at the end of those 10 sessions, we reassess. We say, hey, have you noticed changes and shifts in your life? Have you, seen some differences in how you're communicating with your family, with your partner, with your beloved? Have you begun to feel more ease and grace in your body and more safety and relaxation? So it's a transformation is definitely a process, just like we've been on a process for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years of our lives where, especially as a child, we're generally ingrained to the association that our emotions are not welcome, that you can't feel this, big boys don't cry, put on
Little
your
girls don't put on an act or don't show too much anger.
exactly. All these things that have been ingrained inside the cells of our body for a long time. So when someone comes to me and they want to change overnight, I say, okay, we can do our best, but the patterns, the habitual patterns are going to be there continuously. And, people change for sure. At the end of the day, there's core elements of our childhood, of our life that do take a little bit of time. For me, as a child, like when I was in university, I would get piss ass drunk and would have so much rage towards my mother, towards all the things that I hated her for, all the decisions that she made that, I felt neglect and I felt like she didn't love me and I felt all these different things and I had suppressed all of that. And naturally, when we take things like, drugs and medicines and alcohol, it brings all that to the surface. I didn't know what to do with all that. I would just get so upset and angry and take that out on all the other people around me. And it wasn't really until I came into this field that I started to learn a deeper discourse for the mind to then have the capacity to drop into the mystery of the body. And I had to feel all of that frustration. And, I remember a really massive life-changing moment for me. The end of the 2-year master's degree I did in spiritual psychology, we were sitting on the back deck of my boat in Los Angeles, and I'd done this beautiful project. It was called The History of Loving. And it was all these different moments through my childhood, all these different times where I had had a lot of frustration and angst and anger towards her. And in this process, I shared her this beautiful book I had made, and I just generally, from my heart and soul, I said, "Thank you, Mom. I actually didn't. I wouldn't want it any other way. I am the man I am right here, right now, because of everything that happened in the past." And it wasn't me saying, "Yeah, I love you, but I still think you're a cunt." It was like me saying, I love you. Sorry, I have a sailor mouth that it comes out of me
Don't worry about
sometimes.
it. Okay,
But
we're
that's
gonna
often what I see happen is people are like, oh yeah, I'm grateful, but underneath that, their cells of their bodies still want to rip their mother, their father, their beloved's head off. And what I experienced in that moment was actually an embodied gratitude. And when I met her in that way of saying, thank you, I wouldn't want it any other way, I watched before my eyes, and this was the absolute revelation. I watched her physiology change. It was like I gave her space to let all of her own guilt and all of her own, inner angst of not feeling like she was a good mother. And I said, Mom, I love you. Like, thank you. Every single decision you made has supported me to grow up and to be who I am right here and now. And we get to, from this moment, actually have a beautiful, healthy healthy relationship together, and it changed the entire relationship I had with my mother. And I feel, generally, if you look at most individuals and you see their relationship with their parents, it's usually a good identification of how they are with their own inner game.
Mm. What do you, I mean, how do you ever approach this work with the men and women that you work with, like their relationship to their parents and the impact that it might have on their intimate life?
For sure, for sure. I mean, intimacy, especially when we get into, the deeper layers of sexuality, what I noticed in my journey when I did my master's degree is that whole program was like belly up. It didn't really deal with sexuality. So for a long time in my life, I had my coaching practice and then I had my sex life. And I didn't even think that there was any intertwining connection until a woman came in my life many years ago who really introduced me to this tantric path and began to hold a space, and we began to teach together as well into the field of tantra, where sexuality was just as welcome as emotions, just as welcome as consciousness. And what happens often when sexuality gets introduced, it's like that's the only thing that's there, and now we're in a tantric field and everything else disappears and it's all about sex. And it's like,
Mhm.
no, it's just like anything else. Like, we have our sex life, we have our conversations about our mind, we have our conversations about our emotions, all this. And what I see is that most individuals have never had a healthy communication model around conscious sexuality. So, sexuality is often being taught from a religious framework of abstinence, and sex is bad, and you only should have sex at the one moment when you're going to procreate, and even then, you still should be possibly sinned by God, which is completely crazy and obscure to me. And then the other side of the spectrum is pornography, where you watch and a woman should be ready and wet within 2 seconds because a man's, hard on is there. So where does that leave? That leaves for a lot of humans really confused, really misunderstood, and often with a whole busload of trauma because they've been raised by parents, by guardians, individuals that have never had sexual education themselves. So, in general, sexual education on this planet is pretty piss poor. And what does that mean? That we get to then go to the building blocks, and we get to go to the building blocks to remember that you and I are having this conversation right now because at one point your mom and dad came together, sperm and egg met, and created life. At one point my mom and dad came together, sperm and egg met, created life. So what's really the ironic piece around all this is that the greatest life force energy that we know inside this human body is our sexual energy. And yet, that is what is most suppressed in 99.9% of cultures, societies, childhood is sexual energy. Don't touch your genitals. Something's wrong with you. Ooh, girls have cooties, or there's not often a conversation of like, intimacy, connection, and places that allow sexual energy to be present. So by the time that a young boy starts to feel his first hard on, he's like trying to suppress it. I remember as a young boy in the back of the classroom, like, what do I do with this thing?
Oh man.
It wasn't like I could raise my hand and be like, teacher,
I have a
I
hard
know
on.
we're talking about, psychology or geography, but I have a hard on right now and I don't know what to do with it. Like, what would happen if a child's had that conversation? It'd be obscene. So,
That would be probably the teacher would also be blocked too. I don't think they would be stunned. Like, what do I say to that? Especially if they're not, I don't know, they're not teaching anatomy or what was it, sex ed. Did you have sex ed in school?
we had sex ed. It was generally, I remember my sex ed, if I remember, it was like really horrific pictures of STDs that have taken over people's bodies. And it was like, I think the sex ed and the drug education was all in one. So it was like, if you're going to at some point possibly have sex, you need to she needs to wear this, he needs to wear this, and it should maybe happen for a few minutes, and then, you really shouldn't be that close to one another because if you're that close, it's something bad's going to happen. I
Wow.
mean,
So
you know,
arousing.
yeah, very arousing. What's scary to me even more is what the post-COVID world is dictating around sexuality. That is a even more frightening conversation
Let's
because the
get
number
into
of
that.
people.
What is it dictating? Yeah. I'm
I
I'm
mean,
all new. I mean, I've heard some things, but I would love to hear what you've met or
I I see a variety of different pieces. I see a global mass awakening happening right now, where a lot of the people who were normally buying into the stories that were being presented before are really starting to question, and I love that. However, on the other side of that, all of those people who will never buy into any other story than what the media and what everyone presents is only trying to force their opinions more and more and more. So it's like we're just expanding and we're making our differentiations larger and larger and larger. And yet at the heart of that, like any great relationship, where can love be at the center, where we can actually love and appreciate our neighbors, where we can appreciate someone else's viewpoints and opinions without needing to censor, control, and dictate how a culture thinks, believes, and behaves. And unfortunately, we are tremendously censored in what we're able to share out into social media, out into the world, especially around sexuality. I mean, probably 90% of my colleagues all work in this field around conscious sexuality. And the number of stories, and a lot of them are phenomenal teachers with very professional backgrounds that are just meeting different edges around supporting people to have a deeper conversation around sexuality. And out of those 90%, at least 60 or 70% of them have been either shut off at times, have had their accounts deactivated, the moment you begin to bring a different education around intimacy, around sexuality, around, you know, either physically or energetically taking the mask off of life, like you're immediately someone's like, oh, this person should not, their words are not welcome. So we live in a free world, but in many ways we don't. So it's a very different environment that we're in, and more things are going underground, more things are being hidden, and I think everything happens in its own perfection. But I think all anyone can do who's listening is each day check in with their own body and really with their own being and say, am I, being controlled in my freedom? Is my sovereignty being taken away? Can I exercise my capacity to move my emotional body, to have sexual freedom? And when I say sexual freedom, that doesn't mean you're going to go around fucking every person you meet. It just means that you're a sacred sexual being that has every right in the world to express that in a tactful, beautiful, protected way. And the other side is when people find their sexual freedom, they're just boasting it all out in the world, and that actually it can be more of a detriment than a positive. So we really have to find that balance point in between that gives people permission to express, but also begins to give them a deeper permission to just be at home in their own body, in their own space, and to let go of trying to be anyone else that they're not. And when you let go of the comparison, when you let go of the competition, when you let go of all of those different labels, then love actually begins to enter. And love looks different. Love looks different for so many different beings and people and situations. And the only way I've found to know when love is present is when I ask myself, am I living in the integrity of my heart? Am I living in the integrity of my soul? Am I willing to express my boundaries? Am I willing to say, no to someone? Is somebody or some culture, institution, something coming in that's inhibiting my capacity to say no? And in many ways, that's what's happening. So it really, we're in a dance right now in humanity that's really confronting our human rights more than anything. And that's, it's a pretty deep conversation and maybe not the direction we're going here, but I just want to put that out there because I think it's all connected.
It is about the censorship, at least this part of what sexuality is going through right now. Firstly, I have seen it before the pandemic also. So I follow many people that are working in this field, and at least one woman, I've seen her before the pandemic. She had her Instagram channel taken down thrice. She got it back up. That's because her community wrote, not only she wrote to Instagram, but also her community wrote and requested that that channel be brought back up. So that was a joint effort, let's say. And I haven't seen since then, and this was before the pandemic, I haven't seen her channel being taken down. But I've seen other channels being taken down on YouTube a lot, of all places. And what I've often wondered was why, and I still haven't seen this, why don't facilitators, no matter what their modality is, Tantra, Neo-Tantra, coaching, therapy, psychology, sex ed, kink, you name it, like perhaps there are more walks of sexuality that I don't know of. Why don't they unite and reach out to these conglomerates? Because that's what I call YouTube, that's what I call Facebook and Instagram. Udemy was another one that's a pet peeve of mine. I was taken down there, not just me, a lot of people. And why don't we unite and write to these people saying, hey, look, we know you have the medical perspective, you have the, what is it? Celibacy or abstinence perspective of sexual education. Well, how about conscious sexual growth for adults? How do we hold space for that? How do we have people that are trained, that work with you, conglomerates, and filter out what is pornography? Because some things I do see them out there, and they could use more, let's say, figuratively light in them. Maybe you can filter out some of these things, and maybe you're not the best equipped at it. Take us, because we're trained in this. We've worked for so many years. We can help you. Not like the censorship that I've seen with these conglomerates. We don't like something, we take them all down. At least that's what Udemy, I don't know if you know about the Udemy platform, but 30 plus
Yeah.
million students there. And they decided one day, sexuality, relationship, dating, seduction isn't good for our business. So we're going to take everybody down.
hmm hmm
Some courses, could have been filtered, but nobody had the expertise. Why don't we, as facilitators, why don't we unite?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I can also, what I've found is that it does take a tribe to make a difference. And I like the idea and the vision of that. What I've seen the past year, which has been really beautiful, is there's been a lot of online festivals and conferences that are slowly introducing a deeper place of integrated, masculine, feminine sexuality approaches. I mean, almost every one of them I've been speaking at in one form or another. I organized two of them. And I think things like this that are bringing a education for people who are wanting it are great. What I generally find when a group of people comes together to try to set a new pattern or standard to a larger conglomerate, there's generally a lot of, resistance just because the moment sexuality enters the conversation, especially, from the US, there's litigation, there's insurance, there's all these other pieces that come with it. And it's so this whole umbrella of the evils of sexuality then enter in. And I think what I've seen is there are, different influences and people having these different conversations and making a difference with what's possible. And it does take time. I think everyone edges on the place of how much am I going to share? Because at the end of the day, like I live in Bali, 90% of the work I do, I mean, I do in-person retreats and workshops, and I love doing that. But I do a lot of work online, and what that means is having a social media presence and having that. And So for myself, if I enter into different things and then my name gets recognized as some individual trying to go against the system that's there, I know that's necessary and an important piece, but I also know that in doing that, if that gets taken down, then I'm losing part of my economical foundation. And it's unfortunate, but that's also kind of what's there. So what I've been feeling into is like how, like even with our academy, we have we give a free hour-long conversation from my partner Raven around, tips for sacred sexuality, and it's very woman-focused. And that's a free, webinar that people can hop on, and it introduces them into all of our different online courses. And trying to make Facebook ads that appease that particular piece so that way we can reach more people with a greater sacred sexuality education. We've been shut down every which way we possibly can, and what it requires is just continual persistence. And it's not for me generally in a service space. It's not necessarily even persistence to make more money. Like I find I have to be persistent to increase the level of the educational format that people are receiving, because I know if I can reach somebody with this podcast or my own online course who wouldn't normally have access to that in some part of the world, then I know their perception can begin to change and they can influence those around them, with consciousness, with awareness, with a deeper landing of what's possible again when we come back and find safety in our own body. So sexuality is a massive conversation. It's a massive trigger for so many individuals. And I even notice, as being a man who is a male tantric practitioner teaching in the field of tantra, the moment I say that to anyone, I have 1,001 judgments coming on me before I've even opened my mouth, because of all of the misuse of sexual energy that's happened, that's caused a lot of trauma, abuse, and neglect inside individuals' personal lives, as well as when they've reached quote unquote healers. So the number of people that we have come to our retreats, to our workshops, to, for sessions, who are incredibly skeptical because a lot of them have worked with somebody who's taken advantage of their surrender, who's taken advantage of their trauma body. And it's unfortunate, and we're in a reshaping of society. So all of the male tantric practitioners that I know, that I associate with, I do my best that they're holding a very strong point of integrity, because I know the moment a woman comes and I'm working with her, or a man, and they begin to let down some of their walls and they begin to be vulnerable, whether it's online or whether it's in person. If there's any bit of sexual agenda inside of me that wants to try to get something from them other than just supporting them to come back home to their heart and to be in service to their soul's evolution, then I could easily take advantage of that. But that's not the world I've been trained into. But there's a lot of individuals from an older generation who have done that and have been dealing with the effects of that. So what I stand for as a younger man in this field is a very strong container that allows safety to be at the absolute forefront. And at that place, when safety is at the forefront, then the healing and the revelations and the deeper layers of someone actually beginning to feel safe in their body can begin to be there.
Okay. So I'm gonna, there's one thing that we have like 30% women watching us, and many of them write to me, especially on Instagram, and let me know that, I tried to work with this person and something came up in the session, crazy stuff sometimes. And my reaction is always, whoa, that's not coaching. That's not what a somatic coach does. And especially if it wasn't discussed before. And my question to you right now would be, what would you say to women watching if they were ever to work with a man, sexologist, tantric practitioner, any other walk of or modality of sexual work? what would you advise them or tell them to look for in order to assess that person?
Well, it's a great question. What you would look for is referrals from others, from people that you trust.
Mm.
You know, the deeper tantric practices, I put absolutely no advertisement of any of that sort on my website. The only time I'm often doing those practices are when my partner, who works a lot with women, who works a lot with women's sexual trauma, when she refers them to me, or someone else who I've worked with through the years who refers me. I that's just a very strong piece for me, is having a positive referral from a friend or someone that you know that you trust. Secondly, have a conversation, whether it's, online or in person, and just bring up all of your concerns to that individual, and trust in your intuition, because what I see, especially for women, is that, and this happens in the world of dating as well, when a woman gets date raped or abused or something's happened sexually, is that 90% of the time there was an inner feeling that was coming up, and they said, I think I need to take myself away from this, but they didn't trust that inner feeling. Not 100% of the time, there are situations, but generally in the women I've worked with for the last 15 years, and there's been a lot, it's they didn't trust that inner voice, and that's tough to always trust because you don't know what it is. So begin to lean in to trust your intuition, and to the moment something doesn't feel right, the moment you're feeling confronted, the moment something is rising up, that you're feeling a flight response or a freeze response, and it's tough to completely know the differentiation of that unless you've had training in the nervous system. But the moment something doesn't, say something, bring it into your awareness, because, and then see how the practitioner responds. Are they responding from a way of needing to fix you to make it better, or can they just be with you in that place and allow you to come back into rest and digest? The best way to move through the sexual trauma that often, especially women, and I work a lot with men who have had sexual trauma as well, is that there's two strong pieces, and the first one is very triggering for many, is often the place in which sexual trauma leaves the body. It often needs to be met in a similar conscious energetic to the place in which it was received.
Mm.
So what that often means, if you're meeting a practitioner who isn't able to hold that place very clearly, very strongly, with a lot of assertion, and not entangling any of his own cords into you, then it can be a beautiful healing session. But there often are a lot of cords that get tangled up inside of that. And two, the second piece of that is being able to always, the moment that have integrative time, have time after a session, or after you've listened to something, after you've noticed that you're starting, things are rising up, let your body feel it, but then have some time for integration, for rest and relax, to really bring your nervous system into a place that can meet the world. There are many humans on this planet who live day to day either in a flight response or a freeze response, and they've never had any education around the nervous system to begin to know the difference. So, sexual trauma brings up a lot, and, again, both for male bodies and female bodies. I say that because I think some of the worst, most horrific sexual trauma that I've witnessed and held space for has been inside of male bodies. And, for the men who are listening, who have never had a safe space to communicate to another, and whether it's myself or another practitioner, find a place where you can just begin to unravel that. And as you begin to unravel all the stories and all the things inside, and that can begin to be let go of, that's where spaciousness can begin to happen inside of relationships. But if you're in a relationship and you've noticed you've attracted the same partner over and over and over again, then usually the piece that's most consistent is yourself. And the reason you've attracted that is there's usually some sort of traumatic response that's drawing in that person because he or she reminds you of something that an individual in the past did, said, or had done to you that is giving you an opportunity to learn, grow, and evolve. But it's really challenging to be with that without numbing through alcohol, porn, addictions, everything else, and without running away. The growth, the transformational growth process is not for the faint of heart. It's one who's willing to completely confront all of their edges inside.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. That is
Mm.
beautiful. There's more that I would love to ask you, especially around masculine trauma, because some people have begun to open this discussion not from our field. I've had recently an interview with an actor. He's 26, totally from a different walk of life, and he shared his sexual molestation story from his grandfather when he was a child. And
Mhm.
it opened up a can of worms because more people in his family had been traumatized by his grandfather. And he ended up writing a book about this. And I feel that there isn't enough public conversation around what men go through and what drives them to then do that to other people. Some men, not all, because that's also true. So that would probably be a huge discussion to have one day. But for now, I'd like to ask you one last thing. Where can people find you? Like, where do we find your work, your wisdom, the beautiful things that you bring to the world?
Yeah, great question. For one, the academy that my partner and I run together, which is called Embodied Awakening Academy. So if you go to embodiedawakeningacademy.com, you can check out all the information. And on that website, we do almost weekly podcasts. So we have a podcast called Love, Sex, and Freedom, which you can look up on, iTunes and all the Spotify and all the podcast places. Yeah, and we have a lot of these type of conversations, and it's often different excerpts from our workshops and retreats that are put in there. And then I'm just having my website redone right now, but you can go on there. You can go to aaronkleinerman.com, and AARONKLEINERMAN.
I'll
And
put
you can
links
see
under the video.
yeah, you can see all the information there. And there's so much information. I've been just recently getting into Clubhouse, so we've been doing weekly talks on there. If you're in the Clubhouse world, which is really fun, I do a lot, and I do a lot of different festivals and different online things and summits with a lot of the teachers and colleagues I know around the world who are all in this field. So, and if I can support you in any way, on IG, it's the Soul Navigator. Send me a message if there's something that feels, really personal. I get a lot of personal, messages like that quite often where people feel like, okay, I can express this to him because maybe he's the only one that can understand. So I'm quite used to having the conversations, and people are like, "Oh my God, I've never talked about this before." They're like, "You sure you can handle?" I'm like, I've been doing this for a long time, and I really welcome that because I think when someone feels safe enough to express, then I know that healing is right there and it's happening. So yeah.
Okay. So that's quite a leap, let's say, from a ship captain to what do I call you? What would be the best description I would give you?
A human behavior, sex and relationship therapist, something along those lines, or a
Okay.
tantra coach. It kind of depends on the audience, but I'm using all of those different verbiages, and I'm also just a dude finding his way in the world.
Okay. Well, I'd call you a very sensitive and perceptive man who can actually hold space for both men and women.
Mm,
How's that?
thank you,
So from
thank
a
you.
ship captain to that, huge leap. Well, the gift was there, so
Hmm.
um,
Gift was there. I was just had to get out of my own way, and I still do my best to do that as well.
okay. Well, I think you do a great job at it, and I
Hmm.
think this discussion was beautiful. And I hope it inspires as many men and ladies here to look you up and your work. And hopefully, we'll be able to meet once in person. I hope that eventually we'll be able to do live retreats again, and maybe my first trip to Bali. I've never been there, so
Yeah,
that
come to
will be a
Bali,
life,
come to Bali.
yeah, life
I'm
achievement for
not,
me. Hmm.
But when the borders open again, for sure, we'll be here. Bali's very much home, so we'll be here. Come find us.
All right. Okay, so thank you very much, Aaron. May you have open paths to everything that you set out to do, and I hope to see you again with more discussions, as time goes by.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the work you're doing, and I really honor and I appreciate you and everything that the impact you're making in this world.